All right, in this video, we're going to be reviewing how to do if statements in MATLAB. All right, so what are if statements? So if statements are a way for you to control what your computer program does under different situations, right? So often we want our program to perform different tasks or computations depending on different situations, and we don't want to write separate programs for it. We want it all to be in the same program. We just want it to do slightly different things, right? And so if statements depend a lot on Boolean logic. And so, if you recall, Boolean logic is basically a set of statements that either return true or false, right? And I always tell people that the best way to learn if statements is to literally read them like a sentence, right? And so, the way to read if statements is that if this condition is true, then do this, right? And so some examples for this would be, if it takes less time to take side streets to work, then take the side streets, right? That might be something that you think about when you get in your car and go to work or school, every day, right? Another example is that if the pizza has pineapples on it, then it's not a pizza anymore. Then just don't eat the pizza, right? It's gross. And last, if your coupon is still valid, then you can order Carl's Jr. for lunch, right? Okay, so Boolean logic. So Boolean logic is basically a set of logical statements that either return true or false, right? And so a Boolean expression or Boolean statement is necessary for an if statement. And so kind of the anatomy of an if statement looks like this. So we have if, and then inside here we have some kind of Boolean statement where this is something that can either be true or false. And if that's true, then we just do stuff, okay? And so here's an example here. We have a variable x is equal to 7. And so if that variable is not equal to 5, okay, and so that's something that's true, right? And so this is an expression that checks to see if x is not equal to 5. That's true in this case because x is equal to 7. Then set x is equal to 5. Okay. All right, and so the most basic if statement that you can write is just an if statement. And so an if statement will check a single Boolean expression and execute the code if that if statement returns true. Okay, and so you're going to start the statement by typing if, and then you can add parentheses. I know parentheses are optional, but for me personally, I think it makes it look really a lot cleaner if you add parentheses, right? And then on the next line, you start typing the code that you want to execute if it's true. And then when you're done writing that code, you type end to kind of tell the program that this is the end of the if statement. Okay. You can write as much code as you want inside the if statement. All the examples I'm going to show today just have a single line of code just for the sake of brevity, but just know that you can do more than one. Right? And so always remember that when you write an if statement, just keep in mind that if the Boolean expression that you write is going to return false, then the program is just going to ignore everything inside the if statement. So that code is just not even going to execute, right? And so here's kind of how you would do it. So here's kind of how I broke down the last one. So we write if, we open the parentheses, then we add our Boolean expression in there, then we add the code that we want to execute, then we end it with an end state. Okay, so that's a complete if statement right there. Okay, but we can do more than just an if statement, and so we can add an else condition, right? And so what the else condition does is that it tells the program what to do in case the original Boolean expression returns false, right? And so this is kind of like a contingency plan. You can almost think about that, right? And so going back to our examples for earlier, it said if it takes less time to take side streets to go to work, then take the side street. But if the freeways are faster, else, then take the freeway, right? And so if the pizza has pineapples on it, then don't eat the pizza. But if the pizza does not have pineapples on it, since so the original statement is false, then you can eat the pizza, right? And then if the coupon's valid, then you can order Carl's Jr. If the coupon's not valid, is expired, then you just starve. Right? That's kind of your only course of action there. Right? And so remember, your program will execute either the contents of the if statement or the else, but it's never going to execute both. Okay, so it's like an either or kind of thing. Okay, so else statements are useful because it kind of ensures that your program does something in an if statement. Okay, and so here's an example. And so here we have here's our if statement from earlier. And so if x is less than 5, then we said 5. But if that's false, in this case it is false because x here is greater than 5, then we execute this one. And so in this particular case, we're going to execute this code right here, which sets x equal to 0. Okay, and so a spin off this is called an else if statement. And so, if your original Boolean expression for the if returns false, you can tell the program to do something else. But if you want to add a Boolean expression to check on that one, then you would do that with an else if. Okay, and so the else if statement will execute if the original Boolean expression returns false and its own Boolean expression for the else if returns true. Okay, so it's you know, the logic starts to get a little bit messy on it. So I'm not going to go through all these examples here, but you can read it. Okay. Um, you know, but I think the second one's probably the most easiest to understand. So if the pizza has pineapples on it, then don't eat the pizza. But if the pizza has pepperoni on it, then eat the pizza. Okay. And so the only case where you actually eat the pizza here is that if the pizza does not have pineapples on it and it has pepperoni. Okay. And remember, the same rules apply here. And so, the program will only execute one, either the if statement or the else if statement, but it's never going to execute more than one inside. Okay. And you can add more than one else if as well. And so here's kind of an example of what that looks like in MATLAB. And so first we check to see if the x is less than 5. And so that's not true. And so this first part is false. And so we're not going to execute that. And then we check to see if x is greater than 10, right? And see here we're using else if. And if that's true, then set x is equal to 0. Okay. Right, and so you can actually combine all these together. And so you can have an if, else, right? And so you can add as many else's if you want. And so, this kind of really lets you customize your program and to kind of do lots of different things, okay? And so when you write these statements, just remember that there can only be one if. So the if kind of starts us off. There can only be one else, and actually the else has to come at the end of the statement. But you can actually have as many else if you as you want, right? But you don't need to have all of these actually. So the only thing that's necessary in an if statement is just the if. All the other parts, the else if and the else, you can add to it to customize it, but it's not really necessary. Okay. And remember, when you're writing if, else, no matter how many conditions you have, the program is only going to execute one block of code, not multiple. Okay. And so here's an example here. So, and so here we have an if, else. And so first we check to see if x is less than 5. And so that's true. And so x is equal to 5. Okay. And so it might be tempting to think here that, this code here is going to execute as well because, the second condition is also true because x is less than 10. But since the original if statement here returned true, then it's going to ignore everything else, right? So the thing with if, else, the program only selects one of these statements, okay? And so here's another example where it runs to the else, okay? And so, both of these expressions here, the if and the else if, are going to return false because x is 14, and then we're going to come down here, right? And so if statements, they're a very important part of programming, and there's lots of different ways that you can use them. And so what I always tell people is that, you have to practice it. Otherwise, you're never going. It's a skill. It's in concept, it's easy to understand, but it's a skill that you have to practice to really master.